Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation, where I review action figures and then articulate 5 points to help you decide if you want to add that figure to your collection. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, poseability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and if you enjoy my content, please like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube rigmarole. This is still a pretty new channel, so it really helps. As you can see behind me, I'm a pretty big DC fan. My collection is a mix of DC Direct, McFarlane, and Metallo. Pretty much whatever I can kind of fudge in there. I mostly like what McFarlane is doing, but when it comes to non-Batman characters, well, let's just say he's been working a little too slow for me. But DC Comics isn't the only license that Todd has. He also has the license to Warhammer 40,000. Truth be told, I've never actually played the game, but I recently came across this Necron Warrior figure, and I wondered to myself, could I possibly put him in my DC collection as Metallo? Fear not, though, even though I don't know a whole lot about the game, I'm still going to be looking at the figure based off of its own merits. So if you're a Warhammer fan, don't worry, I'm going to be just as thorough as always. Starting off with the packaging, and we can see a lot of similarities to the DC Multiverse box. Putting them side by side, we can see that they're the same size and have big windows in the front, similar corners at the top, brand logo at the bottom, windows at the top of the box, and windows on the side. Things do get a little bit different on the opposing side. DC just has the name of the character and what the source material is, whereas Warhammer has this nice artwork. To be honest, this is the kind of thing I wish that they would do with DC. And the back has some nice artwork flourishes that kind of remind me of H.R. Giger, as well as these product shots of the two figures in the line. Pulling out the figure, you can see that the backer card is yellow and has some nice subtle artwork on it. Again, similar style to what Todd does with the DC Multiverse figures. I really like this box. In fact, I'd go so far as to say I like it more than the DC Multiverse. It's just a lot more visually interesting. Hopefully, we'll start to see something a little bit more like this in the future. For packaging, I'm giving the Necron Warrior 1 whole point. Moving on to presentation, we can see that the Necron Warrior stands at 7 inches. For the uninitiated, the Necrons are an ancient race of robots. They're made of a nearly indestructible living metal and are capable of self-repair. As we can see, this guy has been pretty well beat up. Starting off with the head, and it's immediately difficult to not think of Terminator. Not just the fact that it's a metal skull, of course, but also the glowing eyes and the pistons in the neck. See some nice cracks in there. I have to give them credit, though. Any kind of robot skeleton is naturally going to be compared to the Terminator, so they did make some very striking changes. For example, the face doesn't look like a regular skull with normal teeth, it's just more of a caricature. And then moving down, we have a more traditional rib cage that kind of evokes the alien. Flipping him around, and I just love all of this texture on the shoulder armor, and these vertebrae are really cool too. Another thing that I like is how asymmetrical he is. The forearms don't match, the legs don't match, so he has a lot of personality. More great damage detailing on this thigh, and I also like the bits of wires just kind of hanging out. I also like his two-toed feet. Kind of reminds me of Metalhead from the Ninja Turtles. It captures the look and feel from the game pretty well, but keep in mind that I'm primarily looking for this to be a stand-in for Metallo from Superman. Lucky for me, there have been a lot of different Metallo designs over the years, and this almost feels kind of like a hodgepodge of all of them. Whether you want him for your Warhammer collection, for Superman, or just as a cool, creepy alien robot, the Necron Warrior looks awesome. For presentation, I'm giving the Necron Warrior 1 whole point. Moving on to poseability, and there are definitely some very interesting choices here. Starting off with the head, it's on a dumbbell joint, but because of how flat his head is, it doesn't really give you a whole lot. He can look up that much, and down that much. He can also shift front and back a little bit, side to side, and a little bit of tilt. The first bit of interesting articulation is at the shoulders. Thanks to these deep cavities, we can see that the Necron Warrior has a dumbbell joint inside of his shoulders. Gives her a great range of motion. Going straight up, he can only lift his arm that high because of the shoulder armor, but using the dumbbell joint, he can shift forward and upward. Single jointed elbow, unfortunately, but honestly, because of the nature of the design, I don't know if they could have done anything different there. There is, however, a small amount of swivel at the elbow, but because of the curvature of the forearm, it doesn't really do much. And then we have the typical McFarlane ball hinge at the wrist. Taking a peek under the wiring, we can see a ball joint in the chest cavity, and also one in the waist, which pretty much just makes his whole abdomen one big dumbbell joint. Taking advantage of that joint, he can of course twist all the way around. He can't arch back too far because this is pre-sculpted leaning forward, so naturally he can hunch forward very well. Moving on to the hips, they hinge outward this much. They also swivel at the the base, but this thigh, which is a little bit thicker, has another swivel inside of that. Single jointed knee, but similar to the elbow, there is a little bit of swivel. And then the typical McFarlane ankle balls, they allow for hinging forward and back. I don't know if you could hear the clicking of those D10s, but we'll talk about that in a second. Fair amount of side to side, and of course articulated toes. Getting him to stand up on his own is definitely a balancing act, and these clicky ball ankles do not help. I do wish there was a bit more, but because of these proportions, I don't know how McFarlane could have pulled it off. And limitations aside, you can still get him into some pretty cool, creepy poses. For posability, I'm giving the Necron Warrior 1 whole point. Moving on to playability, the Necron Warrior comes with this display stand, pretty much the same one as the DC Multiverse figures, but with a Warhammer logo. More importantly, he comes with his flare, and it's very nicely sculpted. I really like how this green detailing pops, fits in his hands like so, and I gotta say, it looks really awesome. Word of warning though, if you're gonna pose him with the gun, you definitely need to use the figure stand. And even then, it's still kinda hard to click him in place. The Necron Warrior also comes with this scarab. The scarabs are used to convert matter into energy, which can be then used to make new constructs. They're unleashed in war like massive tidal waves, and I have a feeling they were probably more inspired by the scarabs from the Brendan Fraser mummy movies than by real scarabs, but they are still pretty scary, and this does look pretty cool. Between this and the figure, this is honestly a really good army builder pack. But playability is more than just accessories, it's also about how well your figure plays with others, and since I want to use the Necron Warrior for Metallo, here he is alongside a couple of Superman figures. Now on this side we have the DC Essentials, and over here we have the McFarlane Toys Action Comics 1000. If we're honest, this is probably the closest thing to a McFarlane Toys Metallo we're ever gonna get. I might even go in with some neon green to have some kryptonite shining out between the ribs. If you're a Warhammer fan, he's essential, and if you want to use him for Metallo, he'll work just fine. For playability, I'm giving the Necron Warrior 1 whole point. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. I picked up Necron Warrior at Walmart for 20 bucks, which I think is a great value. This is kind of my idea of the perfect action figure. It's a cool looking character, cool weapon, and an extra accessory. A lot of bang for your buck, plus a lot of different displays you can have him run amok in. For price, I'm giving the Necron Warrior 1 whole point for a grand total of 5 out of 5. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Warhammer 40,000 Necron Warrior. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, have fun.